Connie Stevens is almost 90, and when you see her now, you might just hold your heart. Once Hollywood's blonde bombshell, her life was filled with fame, heartbreak, and secrets that were never meant to be told. She sang for soldiers, danced with Elvis, and loved men who nearly destroyed her. But where is she today? And how did it all go so wrong, and then so right? This is the story behind the glamour, the scandals, the survival, and the shocking transformation that will leave you speechless. Don't blink, because by the end, you'll never see her the same way again. A blonde bombshell, unlike any other. When people think of the ultimate Hollywood blonde, they instantly picture Marilyn Monroe. But back in the golden age of glam, there was another woman turning just as many heads, and maybe causing even more trouble. Her name? Connie Stevens. With those platinum curls, dazzling eyes, and that warm velvet voice, Connie wasn't just a pretty face. She was a storm wrapped in "I was never trying to be sexy," she once said. "I just wanted to be seen." But seen she was. Studio executives fought over her like vultures at a feast. She was signed before she could legally drink, and they wasted no time turning her into the next big thing. To the outside world, she was living the dream. But behind the camera flashes and polished performances, there was a deeper story. A young girl pushed into fame, grappling with pressures she couldn't control. She was barely 20, yet already being packaged, polished, and paraded like a product. The pressure to be perfect wasn't just career-threatening, it was soul-crushing. Even Connie herself later admitted, "They saw the girl next door, but I was on fire inside." That fire would lead her into fame, but it would also scorch everything in its path. Next up, we peel back the curtain to discover where that fire came from and how her childhood set the stage for everything that followed. Born into music, raised by chaos. Connie Stevens was practically born with a microphone in her hand. Her father, a jazz musician known as Teddy Stevens, and her mother, a singer too, filled her earliest years with melody. But music wasn't enough to keep their marriage together. When Connie was just a child, her parents split, and that's when her fairy tale childhood cracked. She was sent to live with her grandparents in Brooklyn, and for a while, she managed. But life has a way of hitting hard and fast. At the tender age of 12, she witnessed a violent stabbing right on the street. It shocked her so deeply that she became catatonic. "I stopped speaking," she once shared. "It was like I froze inside." Her grandparents, unsure how to help, made a drastic decision. They sent her to Missouri to live with extended family. It was meant to be a new start, but it felt like punishment. Isolated and homesick, Connie's childhood was far from the glamorous image the world would later see. Luckily, her father stepped in. He brought her to live with him in Eagle Rock, Los Angeles. For the first time in years, she had stability, and she had opportunity. Hollywood was just down the road, and that little girl from Brooklyn was about to take her first big step towards stardom. And speaking of first steps, what happened next would rocket her from total obscurity to teen idol almost overnight. From nobody to neon star. Once she landed in LA, Connie didn't waste time. She enrolled at the Hollywood Professional School, where kids didn't just dream, they trained to make those dreams real. Connie joined a vocal group called the Three Debs, and suddenly, doors started opening. Then came her breakout role in Young and Dangerous. She was just a teen, but there was something electric about her on screen. Then 18 and Curious, and finally, boom, Rock-a-Bye Baby, alongside Jerry Lewis. That film made America fall in love with her. But Hollywood, like always, is a double-edged sword. Just as quickly as Paramount had discovered her, they dropped her. No reason, no explanation. That's how the machine worked. One moment you're the star of the studio, the next you're just a memory. But Connie? She wasn't done yet. She picked herself up and landed a new contract with Warner Brothers. She became the first solo singer signed to their record label. Her TV appearances multiplied, and her fan base exploded. She wasn't just climbing the ladder, she was building it. As she put it later, "I didn't wait for permission. I performed. I became the moment." But the moment that really cemented her legacy, that came in the form of a little show called Hawaiian Eye. Hawaiian Eye and the Sex Kitten Phenomenon. When Connie took the role of Cricket Blake in Hawaiian Eye, everything changed. It wasn't just a hit show, it was her show. She played a wisecracking, ukulele-playing photographer who helped solve crimes in sunny Honolulu. Audiences couldn't get enough. And then came the song, "Cookie, Cookie, Lend Me Your Comb." It became a national sensation. She and co-star Eddie Burns hit the Billboard charts, and Connie officially crossed over into pop stardom. A singer and an actress, Hollywood struck gold. But with every high came a silent low. Connie later confessed, "I loved being on camera, but I hated who I was off it." Fame had made her a household name, but it had also become a golden cage. Warner Brothers renewed her contract. She had everything she thought she wanted. Yet something inside was cracking. Her ambition was boiling over, but instead of guiding her, it was starting to burn her alive. And while the world watched her rise, few knew the other side of the story, the one where a starlet gave away pieces of herself to help others. Behind the glamour, the humanitarian heroine. Despite the chaos behind the scenes, Connie used her fame to give back in ways most stars didn't. She supported cancer groups. She raised funds for Native American scholarships. She even toured military bases with Bob Hope, Barbara Eden, and Lee Greenwood, risking her own comfort to lift others. She received the Lady of Humanity Award, the Humanitarian of the Year Award. Even the U.S. military recognized her efforts. "Those boys needed hope," she once said. "I brought them songs, and maybe a little light." But that light came at a price. During those long tours, she often left her daughters behind. Jolie and Tricia grew up in her shadow, and sometimes completely alone. She was always leaving, Jolie remembered. She gave the world everything, but we didn't get much. It's a painful paradox. Connie, the giver, was also Connie, the absentee. And that absence would ripple through generations. Coming up, the heartbreak of a mother who couldn't balance fame and family, and the daughters who paid the price. Motherhood on the margins. Connie Stevens had it all, or so the world believed. Beauty, talent, money, fame. But the one thing she struggled with most was being a mother. She had two daughters, Jolie and Tricia Lee, both of whom would grow up in the long, shifting shadows of their mother's stardom. Connie wasn't just a working mom, she was an absent one. At the height of her fame, she was flying around the world, filming shows, touring for troops, launching business ventures. To the world, she was doing it all. But at home, she was barely there. Jolie Fisher, her eldest, would later speak out about the deep scars left by that absence. "We were props in her movie," she once said. "She needed us to look like the perfect mom. But when the cameras were off, We were invisible. Things went far beyond just emotional neglect. In a twist that still shocks fans today, Jolie revealed she had been enlisted by her mother to help manage her drug use. As a young girl, a child, she was tracking her mother's pills, even keeping an inventory. Imagine being 10 years old and acting as your mother's caretaker. That wasn't childhood. That was survival. She had me cataloging the chaos, Jolie said. And I did it because that's how I got her attention. And yet, for all the hurt, Jolie never stopped trying to understand her mother. Because deep down, she knew Connie was fighting demons bigger than fame. Her addiction, her broken relationships, her fear of being irrelevant in a world that moved fast and forgot even faster. The heartbreak was generational. The love? Complicated. But it was real. And just when it seemed like the worst was behind her, Connie made a decision that would unravel her already fragile family. Her next relationship would be her most destructive yet. Eddie Fisher, lover, nightmare, father, or none of the above? If ever there was a cautionary tale about choosing the wrong man, it would be Connie Stevens and Eddie Fisher. Fresh off a disastrous marriage to James Stacy, a man so controlling he once cut off her hair while she slept, Connie fell into the arms of Fisher. And not just any Fisher, Eddie Fisher, the same man who had betrayed America's sweetheart, Debbie Reynolds, the same man who left her for Elizabeth Taylor. So why did Connie think she'd be different? Maybe it was his charm, or maybe it was her desperation. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only one in the world, she once said. But he had a way of making every woman feel that way. Their romance was fast and messy. They had 2 daughters, and it was Frank Sinatra, yes, Frank Sinatra, who reportedly pressured Eddie to make an honest woman out of Connie. But marriage didn't fix anything. It only made the damage more permanent. Eddie cheated, repeatedly, openly. The most devastating moment? Connie came home to find 2 Swedish models in her house with Eddie. She didn't cry. She packed her things and filed for divorce. It was like waking up from a bad dream, she said. And yet, the trauma lingered. Eddie wasn't just a bad partner. He was a terrible father. According to Jolie, he crossed boundaries no parent ever should. His behavior would cast a dark cloud over their childhood and over Connie's legacy. But the tragedy doesn't end there. Because the children weren't just victims of bad parenting, they were survivors of a family legacy built on addiction, betrayal, and heartbreak. When the children pay the price for Jolie Fisher, growing up was like living on a movie set where no one ever yelled, "Cut." The chaos never ended. And while most kids were dealing with homework and high school crushes, Jolie was watching her mother fall apart and trying not to fall with her. She battled alcoholism throughout her adult life, a struggle she traces directly back to her family. "Addiction runs in our bloodline," she admitted. "We were trained to cope with pain in all the wrong ways." Her half-sister, Carrie Fisher, yes, Princess Leia herself, faced her own demons. Carrie's battles with mental health and drugs were well documented, but few realized how close to home it all was for Jolie. She wasn't just watching her mother struggle. She was watching an entire family unravel. Money was another ghost that haunted them. Despite Connie's success, the family was often in debt, living above their means. "There was always something to prove," Jolie said, "and we used money to try to feel valuable." But through it all, Jolie tried to break the cycle. She focused on her own children. She sought therapy. She wrote books. She spoke her truth, even when it hurt. "I love my mother," she said, "but I had to learn how not to be her." So where did this pattern begin? Why did Connie keep falling for men who treated her like she didn't matter? The answer goes back to a man she should have held on to, but didn't. Men, mistakes, and misery. Some people fall in love. Connie Stevens, she didn't just fall, she plunged. And she did it with her eyes wide open and her heart wide shut. Her love life played out like a cautionary tale wrapped in silk sheets. The Hollywood starlet who had it all, except what she needed most: safety, stability, and real love. Instead, Connie found herself surrounded by a revolving door of charming liars, seductive opportunists, and dangerously broken men who left her bruised in more ways than one. Her first marriage to James Stacy was a nightmare masquerading as a romance. On the outside, he was handsome, charismatic, and rising in the industry. But behind closed doors, he was a walking red flag, controlling, jealous, and emotionally unstable. There's one story that still haunts fans to this day. Stacy, in a fit of rage, snuck into their bedroom while Connie was asleep and cut off her hair. Not metaphorically, literally. "I woke up with pieces of me on the floor," she later recalled. And it wasn't just my hair. She endured 3 years of that marriage, holding on to hope that things would change. But they didn't. They got worse. And when it ended, she thought the worst was behind her. Then came Eddie Fisher. If James Stacy was a storm, Eddie was a hurricane. Already infamous for leaving America's sweetheart, Debbie Reynolds, for Elizabeth Taylor, Eddie had a reputation that should have sent Connie running. But instead, she leaned in. Why? Maybe she believed she could fix him. Maybe she was trying to prove something. Or maybe she was just that desperate to be loved. At first, it was intoxicating. Eddie was smooth, magnetic, and gave her the attention she'd been starved of. But like every high, it didn't last. He cheated. He lied. And then, he broke her. Most infamously, Connie came home one day to find him in bed, with 2 Swedish models, not even trying to hide it. That was the final straw. She packed up, took her daughters, and filed for divorce. "I was done pretending," she said. "I wasn't going to be someone's fool anymore." But the damage was done. The emotional weight of failed marriages, public humiliation, and betrayal piled onto her like invisible bricks. And in the years that followed, Connie's dating history became a blur of maybes and mistakes. A string of flings and almosts. Some whispered to involve powerful men, others lost to time and memory. "I kept thinking the next one would save me," she confessed in a rare moment of vulnerability. "But all they did was drown me deeper." So why did she keep falling for men who hurt her? Some say it was her childhood trauma, abandonment, instability, fear. Others believe she was addicted to the thrill, the drama, the chaos that felt so familiar. And maybe both are true. But those closest to her say, there was something else, something she never fully let go of. She was chasing a ghost. And that ghost was Elvis Presley. Yes, that Elvis. The king of rock and roll. The man who made her feel safe, seen, and truly wanted. Even if only for a moment. Before the cheating, the breakdowns, the failed marriages, there was Elvis. A brief spark of magic that burned too fast. And when it was gone, no one else ever measured up. Not really. "If I had stayed with him," she once whispered, "maybe everything would have been different." But life doesn't give rewinds. only regrets. And next, we dive into that fleeting, once-in-a-lifetime moment, the night Connie Stevens danced with the king and almost had her fairy tale. Elvis and Connie, a love that could have changed everything. It started with a phone call. Connie was on set when someone said, "It's the king." She thought they were joking. But on the other end of the line was Elvis Presley, cool, calm, and curious. He had seen her on TV. He liked what he saw. "I thought my heart was going to stop," Connie said later. "Elvis Presley was calling me." That night, she went to one of his parties. It was everything she imagined and more. Laughter, music, glamour. And then Elvis serenaded her. Right there, in front of everyone, he sang directly to her. And for a moment, the world fell away. They didn't date for long, but the spark was undeniable. "He made me feel safe," she recalled. That was rare. In the years that followed, she often thought about him, especially when the men she chose let her down again and again. "If I had stayed with him," she said, "I might have been safe." But safety was never something Connie Stevens chose. She chose danger, fire, drama. And in doing so, she left behind a love that could have changed her life. And yet, Elvis wasn't the only powerful man who entered her orbit. Because years later, another unexpected figure appeared in her life and brought with him a scandal no one saw coming. The scandal no one saw coming: Connie and the senator. By the late 1990s, Connie Stevens had mostly stepped back from the spotlight. She wasn't headlining shows or commanding magazine covers anymore, but that didn't mean she was out of powerful circles. In fact, she was quietly moving in some of the most elite ones that included the U.S. Senate. That's where the rumors began. At a charity event honoring military veterans, Connie met a man who had admired her from afar for decades: Senator John McCain. He was running for president, a war hero with a sharp tongue and a complicated past. And reportedly, he was mesmerized by the woman he'd idolized since his Navy days. John always carried a torch for her, one insider claimed. Meeting her was like stepping into a dream. What happened next? No one knows for sure, but whispers grew louder when Connie began appearing at his campaign stops. She made donations. She sat front row at events. And when McCain became sick in his final years, sources say he called her often, late at night, sometimes daily. Even his wife wasn't that involved in the campaign, one staffer admitted. But Connie was everywhere. The speculation boiled over. Were they in love? Were they ever more than friends? If so, how far did it go? Neither ever confirmed it. And yet, the image of the glamorous blonde visiting a dying senator, sending him comfort, perhaps love, lingers like the final scene of a bittersweet movie. But if Connie had hoped for redemption through love, it didn't last. The headlines faded, McCain passed, and once again, she found herself alone and facing a cruel truth. No matter how many powerful men she knew, she was still just a woman Hollywood once loved and had long since forgotten. And speaking of Hollywood's memory, Connie would soon learn just how fast the industry could turn its back. Kicked out, crawling back. For years, Connie Stevens was untouchable. A starlet with a voice like velvet, a face that launched contracts, and a presence that could light up a room. She wasn't just another pretty face in Hollywood, she was the face. But there's something about power that Hollywood never likes, when a woman demands her share of it. By the early 60s, Connie had built herself up from teen films and bubblegum pop into a household name. But behind the scenes, she was growing restless. She was tired of playing the airhead, tired of being handed parts that were nothing more than tight dresses and perfect hair. She wanted drama, grit, depth. She wanted Virginia Woolf, not cute girl number 3. So when the studio told her to go on another PR tour, smile for the cameras, and keep quiet, she said no. She didn't whisper it. She said it loud. And Hollywood, as it often does with outspoken women, slapped back. They pulled her off projects, put her on. ICE suspended her contract. Just like that, she went from studio darling to problem child. It felt like betrayal, she later said, like being kicked out of your own home. The machine that built her had decided she was no longer useful. But here's what they didn't count on. Connie Stevens was not easy to erase. She fought her way back, not with a smile, but with strategy. She signed on to 2 on a Guillotine, a low-budget horror film that most actresses of her caliber would have snubbed. But not Connie. She leaned into it. She brought nuance to the role. Class, darkness. Suddenly, people remembered. This girl could act. It wasn't just a comeback. It was a message. I had to take what I could get, she admitted, but I turned it into something they didn't expect. The movie didn't win Oscars, but it turned heads. It made the studios nervous. Because Connie Stevens wasn't fading quietly into obscurity. She was crawling back in through the side door. Warner Brothers let her return, but not without hesitation. The golden days were gone. The roles weren't as juicy. The paychecks weren't as fat. But Connie wasn't done yet. If the studio system wouldn't open its arms to her, she'd create her own path. She diversified, took roles in TV, made guest appearances, hosted shows. She even started crafting her own projects behind the scenes. It was a slower burn than before, but it was hers. And even when she wasn't on the screen, she kept hustling. She didn't just survive, she evolved. That's what the public didn't always see. While her peers faded or clung to fading fame, Connie adapted, reinvented, quietly reclaimed power in places they weren't watching. Because for her, the fight wasn't over when the cameras stopped rolling. That's when the real fight began. And in the next chapter of her life, she would trade the red carpets for something even more powerful. Ownership, entrepreneurship, and a beauty empire built on her terms. Coming up next, the stunning pivot from fallen starlet to savvy business queen, and how she turned creams, charisma, and courage into a lasting legacy. Business savvy and the beauty empire. Connie Stevens didn't just reinvent herself, she reclaimed herself. When acting jobs dried up and the spotlight dimmed, she built something entirely new, her own business. Long before it was trendy, long before every celebrity had a brand, Connie launched a skincare line. It was smart, it was personal, it was hers. She didn't just slap her name on a bottle, she developed the products, marketed them, and built a company from the ground up. It wasn't glitzy work, but it gave her power, something Hollywood had always taken from her. "This was the first time I was in charge," she said. "No casting directors, no producers, just me." And it worked. For years, the Connie Stevens beauty brand made steady profits. It paid the bills. It kept her independent. But more importantly, it gave her dignity. Still, the past haunted her. The roles she never got. The men who used her. The children who hurt because of her absence. The business gave her strength, but it couldn't erase what had come before. And even with her success, Connie slowly began stepping away. Not just from business, but from public life altogether. So where did she go? And what does she look like now? The answer: might just break your heart. From stardom to silence. Where did she go? One day, she was everywhere. On magazine covers, on TV, in the arms of rock stars and senators. And then, she was gone. Connie Stevens didn't vanish in a scandal. She didn't die young like so many of her peers. She simply stepped back. Slowly, quietly, she focused on healing, on repairing fractured relationships, on her health. She had spent decades running, chasing, surviving. Now, she wanted peace. She rarely appeared in public. When she did, fans gasped. She looked older, yes, but she also looked real, human, fragile. Time had taken its toll, as it does on all of us. But there was still a flicker in her eyes, like a candle that refuses to go out. "She's not the sex symbol anymore," one friend said. "But she's something better. She's herself." These days, she lives mostly out of the spotlight. The once glamorous blonde bombshell now walks with a cane. Her voice is softer. Her days are slower. But every so often, someone recognizes her, and they smile, because for a moment, they remember. And now, we must ask, what does all this mean? What legacy does she leave behind? What will people remember when they think of Connie Stevens? Legacy of a complicated queen. Connie Stevens is almost 90 years old, and her story isn't one of perfect success or glamorous fairy tales. It's one of survival, of pain, of love that hurt, of ambition that cost everything. She was talented, but underestimated, beautiful, but often used, a mother, but one who struggled, a lover, but rarely loved back the way she needed. But she was also brave and bold, and brilliant in ways that didn't always get applause. "She was messy," Jolie once said, "but she was magic." Her daughters have gone on to tell their stories, some of them painful, some of them forgiving, but all of them real. And through it all, Connie's legacy endures. Not because she was flawless, but because she was human. She gave the world her songs, her smile, her sparkle, and sometimes her silence. And maybe that's what makes her unforgettable. So if you see her now, older, slower, quieter, hold your heart. Because in those eyes is a story few could ever live through, and even fewer could survive. Connie Stevens didn't just exist in Hollywood history. She is Hollywood history. Connie's life was more than fame. It was a wild ride of love, loss, and resilience. If her journey moved you, shocked you, or made you think twice, give this video a like, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and stick around for more untold Hollywood stories.